Hello folks, welcome back. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. Listen, I don't like making videos where I have to refute something someone says unless they're a public figure, particularly someone who seems quite desperate and lonely and attached to their cats. So nothing wrong with that. I used to have cats. But this person seems to have no other purpose in life other than spread misinformation and slander people, and once again slandering me. Now, the first time I made a response video to this was because the person was spreading lies and it was harming things, and they were lying about me and misrepresenting the refugee program and the asylum programs here in America. The person's not an attorney. The person doesn't work for the U.S. government. The person is not engaged in these activities except on a personal level and professes to be a subject matter expert. Now, it's possible to be a subject matter expert on these issues, but when you repeatedly lie about people and misstate information, obviously you're not an expert. Now, I have never professed to talk extensively about the asylum program other than to give the broad overview of what the program is and tell you that it's very difficult to achieve asylum in America. So one of my viewers sent me a screen capture of this infamous Facebook group where this woman attacks me again after me doing my Sunday Refugee Cafe Clutch. Now, bear in mind that this is a 2-hour plus broadcast in which I'm fielding thousands of questions, well, at least hundreds of questions in that broadcast, of all sorts of questions. The question came up about birth certificates and the requirement for it. And I addressed this, as I've addressed it many times since February 7th. Now, let's go back to how this all started. But before I do that, let me just tell you, contrary to what this lying, slanderous person is saying and attacking me, you do need a birth certificate to apply for permanent residency in the United States as a foreign national. You do need a birth certificate. It's just factual. You don't have to believe me. You can just go read the USCIS website. Since she challenged me and lied about me, I simply went there. Very simple to do, and you can find this in their policy book. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And here it is, Chapter 4, Documentation for Naturalization. Photographs, application to register, the I-485, a birth certificate, a copy of the applicant's foreign birth certificate or sufficient secondary evidence of birth must be submitted to establish the applicant's country of citizenship for visa, chargeability, identity, and existence derivative relationships. Each foreign birth certificate must include a certified English translation. Officers should check the Department of State's country reciprocity schedule to determine availability of birth certificates as well as acceptable secondary evidence for birth of specific countries. Now, why does that matter? It matters because you need a birth certificate. Aha! But you can have secondary evidence. Correct! Which is what I've said all along. One of my moderators, Erica, was born in Katanga in what was then the Belgian Congo to Flemish parents. There are no birth certificates. Many of my viewers were born in Rhodesia, and there's no records for them, or Northern Rhodesia, which is today's Zambia, and they have no birth certificates. And when they've been concerned about it, my answer has always been the same. There are exceptions to every policy. There are exceptions to every policy. And that's the case here. They will accept sufficient secondary evidence. But some people just aren't convinced by the facts. So, people are just in love with artificial intelligence. So I went and took a look at artificial intelligence, and let's see what that tells us. As you can see here in the screen capture from artificial intelligence search on the internet, yes, you generally need a birth certificate or a certified copy to apply for permanent residency in the U.S. This is a standard requirement for both U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services and the Department of State. It's used to verify your identity, citizenship, and relationship to a sponsor if applicable. What if you don't have one? If you don't have a birth certificate, you can submit other acceptable evidence such as baptismal certificates, school records, hospital or medical records, affidavits. Non-availability certificates. If your birth certificate is genuinely unavailable, you can obtain a non-availability of birth certificate from the relevant authorities. In summary, while a birth certificate is usually needed, USCIS recognizes that not everyone can obtain one. In such cases, they allow for alternative forms of documentation to prove your identity and birth. And that is what I have said from the outset with this entire program, is that there are exceptions to every rule. But from the outset, how did this all start? That's where we're back to now. When this first came about, early on, people said, what documents do I need? And then the birth certificate came up. And my viewers pretty quickly, those who've been in touch with PRM when they started hearing back from them, started talking about unabridged birth certificates. I'm like, I don't know what that is. I said, I've never heard of such a thing. What, an unabridged birth certificate? What is that? I mean, are you allowed to alter birth certificates? An unabridged means to me something that's been altered. If it's been abridged, you've changed it. You can't change birth certificates. So what's an unabridged birth certificate? Well, it's a term that South Africa used for decades. I don't know why they have abridged and unabridged birth certificates, but we never heard any such thing. So I said, I don't know anything about that. And then I had lots of people that endlessly would explain the difference between the two. And I said, I don't know. All I know is that people are being told when they go to speak to PRM that they must have a birth certificate for the naturalization process. I said, and I guess for a while before we got that answer, I said, I guess you must need it for the naturalization because we're not getting indication. But then later people started confirming that they need it for naturalization. So that is the information available from those who've gone through the program, initially the 59ers and those who were interviewed, not just 59ers, because there were about 100 people interviewed. So that's what I said about that. I didn't know what an unabridged was. You guys tell me. Never heard of such thing. We just have birth certificates. And I also said that I believe it's for the naturalization. Then we got confirmation, people saying that was the case. As you can see, you can look it up on the internet and find that out for yourself. I never profess to be an expert about birth certificates. I just explain that there are exceptions to everything. And I use the case of Erica as one. She's not the only one. It's impossible for her to get one when it's impossible. But here's the point for South Africa's refugees coming to America. You must make a good faith effort to get a birth certificate from South Africa because South Africa issues birth certificates. They're not going to look favorably on you if you don't get a birth certificate. Now, that doesn't mean if you went through exceptional circumstances. So I've also said you don't need one to come here. That I've said, and that appears to be the case. All you need to enter the United States is a passport. And there's no indication from USCIS or PRM or the Department of State that you have to have your birth certificate to come in as a refugee. None whatsoever. But you will need it to apply for naturalization. And you will need it to apply for permanent residency, which comes long before naturalization. So I don't know why this lady keeps spreading these lies, but she needs to stop it. You don't have to believe me. I just showed you where to find it. Okay? And as I said all along, there are exceptions to every rule. Now, snipping 55 seconds of a 2.5 hour broadcast on a Sunday, my third broadcast today, and then claiming that I claim that you must have a birth certificate and that's not true, well, that's just poppycock. Who does that? Who dementedly sits around and watches broadcast for hours just to steal my content and use it on Facebook? Twisted people. Folks, the bottom line is you must have a birth certificate if you're a South African if you want to apply for permanent residency. If you're a refugee, you're going to have to apply for permanent residency at some point. If you want to become a naturalized citizen, you must have a birth certificate. But what if you can't get it because you weren't born in South Africa or because you've applied to Home Affairs and they never processed it? You have the application, you show the date, you show the receipt for what you paid, and it still hasn't arrived. Well, then there can be exceptions, but you have to have some sort of documentation. But those are exceptions. They will not look favorably at an applicant who has made no effort to get a birth certificate. So that's the bottom line right here. If you're a South African, you come over, you've never applied for a birth certificate, you don't have one, you say, well, I don't have one. That ain't going to fly. And I'll stand by that statement. All right, there you have it. Enough of her nonsense. Cheers.